December 14, 2014, from Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. It was the Houston Texans at the Indianapolis Colts in this AFC South Division rivalry matchup. The Indianapolis Colts won the toss. They elected to receive, so they would take over first. They would start their first possession on their own 18-yard line, but they would go 3 and out. And so they would punt the ball from the 20. Now Houston would take over for their first possession of the game on their own 32 with about a little less than 14 minutes left in the first. But after 5 plays, they would punt the ball. And so now the Colts would get the ball for the second time in this game on their own 18 once again to start their possession, this time with less than 12 minutes on the clock in the first. They were then faced with a 2nd and 7 from the 21, and Andrew Luck hit T.Y. Hilton for a 9-yard reception, a first down that brought the ball to the 30. Andrew Luck then went back to T.Y. Hilton. He picked up 15 yards in the first down at the 45. But their drive would stall there at the 49, actually, after they picked up a few yards. But out would come the punting unit to punt it from the 49 on 4th and 4. And so now the Texans would get the ball for the second time in this game, now with about 9.5 minutes left in the first. They started off on their own 12-yard line. On 3rd and 7 from the 15, Ryan Fitzpatrick scrambled for 12 yards in the first down at the 27. But their drive would stall on the 32, and out would come the punting unit. And so now the Colts would get the ball for the third time in this game, this time starting off on their own 15-yard line with a little over 6.5 minutes left in the first. They were then faced with 3rd and 9 from the 16. Andrew Luck out of the shotgun, and he goes to Kobe Fleener, but here's Lewis. Lewis jumps in front of it, and he runs it back 27 yards for the pick 6 and the touchdown as the Houston Texans put the first points on the scoreboard. With the score now, Houston 7, Indianapolis 0. So an interception for a pick 6, and the Texans are on the board first, and now the Colts will get the ball for the 4th time in this game. Still with about 6 minutes left in the first quarter. They start off on their own 20. They would go 3 and out for the second time in this game. And so now the Texans would take over with a little over 4 minutes on the clock in the first. And they would go 3 and out as well, as they would end up punting from the 38. So now the Colts would get the ball back for the 6th time in the first quarter. Still a little less than 3 minutes left to play in the first. And so now on 2nd and 5 from the 27, Andrew Luck hit Daniel Herron. He picked up 12 yards in the first down that brought the ball to the Indianapolis 39. Luck then went to T.Y. Hilton, and he picked up 20 yards in the first down that brought the ball across midfield into the Houston 41. Then on 2nd and 10 from the 32, it ended up being Andrew Luck went to T.Y. Hilton, and he picked up 6 yards, and the first quarter came to a close. So after 1 quarter of play, the score was Houston 7, Indianapolis 0. And on the first play of the second quarter, 3rd and 4 from the Houston 26 for the Colts, Andrew Luck out of the shotgun, and he hits Hakeem Nicks for a 26-yard touchdown reception that tied this game up at 7 apiece. So it's now Indianapolis 7, Houston 7. The Texans now would take over with less than 10 seconds ticked off the clock in the second quarter, in the ball on their own 20. Fitzpatrick then went to DeAndre Hopkins for a 16-yard reception and a first down at the 36. Then on 3rd and 4 from the 42, it ended up being actually Fitzpatrick on 2nd and 6 from the 40. He ended up scrambling, and he got injured on the play. He was taken out of the game. In would come Savage. And on 3rd and 4 from the 42, Savage hit Hopkins for a 9-yard reception. They made a first down on the 49. They would end up stalling, though, and having to punt from the 46. So out would come the punting unit, and now the Colts would take over on their own 10-yard line with about 11 minutes left before halftime. They would end up picking up some first downs and getting into Houston territory. But on 2nd and 10 from the Houston 42, Andrew Luck hits Reggie Wayne, and Reggie Wayne coughed it up as Bowie ended up blowing him up and forcing the fumble, and he recovered it. And so now it was Houston's ball on their own 40 with about 8 minutes left before halftime. And Savage fumbled the ball. It was recovered by Werner. And so back-to-back fumbles, and now it would be the Colts ball on the Houston 37 with less than 8 minutes on the clock still in the second quarter. there would end up being a holding penalty against the defense, and so it would be a 1st and 10 on the 32, and then Daniel Herron ran for 11 yards to make it a 1st down on the 21. Luck then hit Hakeem Nicks for an 18-yard pass and was now 1st and goal on the 3. Andrew Luck then hit Dwayne Allen for a 3-yard touchdown pass as the Colts took the lead for the first time in this game, with the score now Indianapolis 14, Houston 7. So now the Texans would take over with a little over 6 minutes on the clock still in the first half, and the ball on their own 23. They would end up going 3 and out would come the punting unit to punt the ball from the 29 as they actually went backwards when Savage was sacked by Juan Francois on 3rd and 9. So now the Colts would take over on their own 32 with less than 5 minutes left before halftime. They would end up picking up a 1st down, but then on 3rd and 4 from the 49, Andrew Luck was sacked by J.J. Watt. So J.J. Watt with the sack, and out would come the punting unit for the Colts to punt it away from the 37. And now the Houston Texans would take over on their own 12-yard line with a little over 2 minutes left in the first half. They would then be faced with a 3rd and 6 after the 2-minute warning from their 16, and Savage hit Hopkins for a 35-yard reception that brought the ball across midfield to the Indianapolis 49 for the 1st down. They would end up stalling, though, as they weren't able to pick up the 1st down on 3rd and 1, and an incomplete pass would bring out the punting unit to punt it away from the Houston. They were in Indianapolis territory on the 40 as they would punt it to the Colts. And the Colts would end up actually having this. They sent out the punting unit, and instead of punting it, it was a direct snap to Blue, and so Blue ended up actually losing yards, and so they turned the ball over on downs. And now the Colts would take over on their own 42 with less than a minute left before halftime. But then on 2nd and 20. On 2nd and 10 from the 48, Andrew Luck hit Dante Moncrief for a 48-yard touchdown pass. But wait a minute, there was a holding penalty. The touchdown was brought back, so no touchdown. And now it was 2nd and 20 from the 42. And Andrew Luck was sacked by J.J. Watt. And that brought the first half to a close. So after one half of play, the score was Indianapolis 14, Houston 7. So now the Texans would take over to begin the second half, and their first possession started on the 20. But they would go 3 and out and punt the ball to the Colts. So now the Colts would take over with less than 13 minutes left in the third, the ball on their own 20. They were then faced with a 2nd and 6 from the 24 and a penalty roughing the passer against the Texans would make it a 1st down on the 39. But their drive would stall on the 47, and out would come the punting unit. And so now the Texans would take over, backed up against their own end zone on their own 7-yard line with 10.5 minutes left in the third. They were then faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 14, and Savage went to Griffin for a 2-yard pass, but there was a defensive offsides, and so now it would be a 1st down on the 19 for the Texans. Then on 2nd and 5 from the 24, Foster ran for 18 yards in the 1st down that brought the ball to the Houston 42, but their drive would end up stalling, and they would end up having a punt from the 43. And so now the Colts would take over with about 6.5 minutes still left in the third, and the ball on their own 22. They would end up picking up a 1st down on 3rd and 4 from the 28 when Andrew Luck hit Richardson for a 16-yard pass that brought it to the 44. But then they ended up stalling, and they would end up bringing out the punting unit to punt from the 50. And so now the Texans would get the ball back with about 4 minutes still left in the third. They started on their own 11-yard line on 1st and 5 from the 16 after a penalty against the defense. Then Foster ran for 4 yards, and then Foster ran for another 2 yards. Now it's 1st down on the 22, and on 2nd and 9 from the 23, Savage hit Posey for a 30-yard reception. That brought the ball across midfield in Indianapolis territory for the 1st down on the 47. Then on 2nd and 3 from the 40, Blue ran for 6 yards in the 1st down that brought the ball to the Colts 34 for the Texans. And on the final play of the third quarter, Savage hit Foster for a 3-yard pass. And so after 3 quarters of play, the score was Indianapolis 14, Houston 7. So now to begin the fourth quarter, the Texans had the ball trailing by 7. It was 2nd and 7 on the Indianapolis 31 for the Texans. but they weren't able to pick up a first down, and out would come Randy Bullock to attempt a 53-yard field goal. It was up, and it was good. And so now the Texans cut the Colts lead to 4 with the score. Indianapolis 14, Houston 10. So now the Colts would get the ball on their own 25 with about 13 and a half minutes left in the fourth. They would end up going 3 and out and punting from the 21 as they actually went backwards. And so now the Texans would take over on their own 14 with about 12 and a half minutes left in the fourth, trailing by 4. They would be faced with a 2nd and 8 on the 21, and they would end up getting a first down when Johnson caught a pass from Savage, and that made for 15 yards. That made a first down on the 36, and on 3rd and 3 from the 43, Savage went to Hopkins. He picked up 9 yards in the first down that brought the ball across midfield to the Indianapolis 48. They would end up being faced with a 4th and 4 from the 42, and they elected to go for it, and an incomplete pass turned the ball over on downs as the Colts defense came up with a huge stop, forcing that turnover on downs. And so now the Colts would take over on their own 42 with just over 7 minutes left in the fourth with a 4-point lead. They would be faced with a 2nd and 2 from the 50. Daniel Herron picked up 6 yards in the first down that brought the ball to the 44, and on 2nd and 4 from the 38, Daniel Herron picked up another 7 yards in the first down that brought the ball to the 31, and on 2nd and 8 from the 23, Daniel Herron picked up another 8 yards as they just kept pounding the rock, and it was now first down in the red zone for the Colts on the Houston 15. Trent Richardson then ran for 9 yards, and the Texans took their first timeout. Then they stopped Richardson for no gain, and on 3rd and 1 from the 6, Andrew Luck was dropped by Jackson for a 5-yard loss as he tried to run the ball. And so out would come Adam Vinatieri to attempt a 29-yard field goal. It was up, it was good, and the Colts extended their lead to 7 points with the score now Indianapolis 17, Houston 10. So now the Texans would get the ball with a little over 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter, trailing by 7. They would end up bringing the game to the 2-minute warning. And then after the 2-minute warning, it would be 3rd and 6 from the 24. Savage would hit Griffin for an 8-yard reception and a first down that brought the ball to the 32. They were then faced with a 3rd and 3 from the 39, and Savage went to Hopkins. It was incomplete, and the Texans used their final timeout. And they elected to go for it on 4th and 3 from the 39, trailing by a touchdown with just a minute and a half left to play. Savage dropped back out of the shotgun, and he was intercepted by Davis. So Vontae Davis comes up with a huge interception, and that puts the nails in the coffin, as all that was left to do for the Indianapolis Colts was for Andrew Luck to take 3 knees as this game came to a close, as the Colts seal up the AFC South with the win over the Texans with the final score, Indianapolis 17, Houston 10. And with the win, the Colts are now 10-4, and they win the AFC South. They are 6-2 in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil, and the Texans are now 7-7 on the season. They're 4-4 on the road. So they Texans in their final road game finished 500. They had a chance to finish above 500, but they ended up finishing 500. Ryan Fitzpatrick was knocked out of the game early, but in this game, Andrew Luck was 18 for 34 with 187 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and 1 interception. He had 18 yards rushing off of 8 carries. Fitzpatrick started the game. He was 3 for 6 with 30 yards, and he actually had 16 yards rushing off of 3 carries, but then he was knocked out of the game, and Savage would end up taking over. I don't even know Tom Savage. I mean, first time I ever saw him in action. He was 10 for 19, 127 yards, and 1 interception. He actually lost 4 yards off of 4 carries. The leading rusher in this game was Arian Foster. He had 26 carries for 99 yards. He had 18 receiving yards off of 3 receptions as well. The leading rusher for the Colts was Daniel Herron. He had 11 carries for 60 yards. That's an average of 5.5. Very impressive. He also had 12 yards receiving off of 2 carries. Trent Richardson had 9 carries for 32 yards. He also had 9 yards off of 2 receptions. The leading receiver was DeAndre Hopkins. He had 5 receptions for 77 yards. The leading receiver for the Colts was T.Y. Hilton with 4 receptions for 50 yards. Hakeem Nicks had 2 receptions for 42 yards and a touchdown as well. And Fleener had 2 receptions for 32 yards. Reggie Wayne had 4 receptions for 24 yards. And Dwayne Allen, of course, had 2 receptions for 16 yards as well as that touchdown. And on defense, the game's leading tackler was DeQuell Jackson. He had 10 tackles for the Colts. Jarrell Freeman had 9 tackles. The leading tackler for the Texans was Mike Muhammad. He had 8 tackles. J.J. Watt had 6 tackles and 2 sacks. The only 2 sacks for the Texans was J.J. Watt's 2 sacks. The Colts had 1 sack, and that was Juan Francois. And he had that sack there. And then each team had an interception. It was Kendrick Lewis for the Texans, and of course for the Colts, Vontae Davis comes up with the interception at the end of the game that put the nails in the coffin and sealed the deal, sealed the victory for the Colts in a tight game, very tightly contested, coming down to the wire. Is the only scoring in the fourth quarter was a pair of field goals, and the Colts end up taking this one with the final score, Indianapolis 17, Houston 10.